The famous British philosopher Bertrand Russell states, "The more intense has been the religion of any period, and the more profound has been the dogmatic belief, the greater has been the cruelty, and the worse has been the state of affairs." Albert Einstein, scientist, states, "I cannot imagine a God who rewards and punishes the objects of his creation, whose purposes are modeled after our own. A God, in short, who is but a reflection of human frailty. Neither can I believe that the individual survives the death of his body, although feeble souls harbor such thoughts through fear or ridiculous egotism."
Good evening and welcome to the Christian Broadcasting Service News Report. Today is April 1st, 2001. I am the Very Reverend Albert E. Lyngzeidelson, and here we have the news, the only news you need or can care to get. The top story for us tonight is our only story for us tonight, and it's the following. Tonight there was an explosion of nuclear power plant in Iran. The disaster was confirmed by Iranian officials who urged their countrymen to give thanks for this act of Allah, which demonstrates the folly of imitating the West in developing nuclear power. Officials claim that this event would allow more Muslims to return to the simple desert living experienced by Muhammad, resulting in greater closeness to Allah. I guess those darn camel jockeys just don't know who the real prophet is, Jesus Christ. And they must abandon these false prophets and come to us Christians for the right, righteous, and true way. Nothing else happened in any country that should be of any concern to Christians in America. And perhaps, Brent, you can tell us what's happening on the American political scene today.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, Reverend Al. President Reverend Dan Quayle reopened Congress with a one-hour prayer tribute to the late Secretary of Education, Reverend Billy Graham. Graham, perhaps best known for his work in fundraising for the Quayle administration, was buried with full military honors as befitted a true Christian soldier. Congress is returning to session following last week's National Week of Prayer in honor of Reverend Graham's funeral at Arlington Cemetery. Among the first bills Congress will consider this session is a bill sponsored by Senator Reverend Jim Baker, repealing all state divorce laws. Another measure under consideration is a bill defining approved jobs for women, including the mandate that no woman may work if she has any children under the age of 21. About time on that, I'd say. That bill is sponsored by Senator Reverend Jesse Helms, who is under consideration to head the National Endowment for the Arts. Funding will also be considered for the proposed Women's Re-Education Center, to be headed by Phyllis Schlafly. The center will concentrate on debunking feminist mythology and preparing women to fulfill their proper Christian roles in today's society. The government is also considering adoption of additional surtaxes to support relief efforts in nations which have complied with the U.S. prohibition on aid to nations which refuse to abandon all forms of birth control and family planning. Officials of the United States official Christian missionary and relief efforts have put out another urgent plea for financial assistance, claiming that relief efforts are overwhelmed as a result of the explosive increase in population in these countries. Missionary head Reverend Robert Flatula has praised the results of the aid decisions and notes that while we are extremely pleased that so many lives have been saved since our government instituted this program, it is important that we place equal emphasis on spreading the Word of God among these newborns. Lord knows we would hate to see them grow up to be Catholics, Muslims, or even worse, godless heathens. The Vatican, always a hot competitor for souls in these underdeveloped countries, has called for an international day of prayer to relieve the suffering in overpopulated regions of Africa and to provide insight to government officials in countries that still support birth control. We should all give thanks for the knowledge that God is on our side in this battle. The Supreme Court, in a unanimous decision penned by Chief Justice Reverend Rush Limbaugh, supported the American Bar Association's disbarment of all female lawyers. The one-day decision also noted that similar actions taken concerning women in comparable careers which interfere with their God-given function as mother and family nurturer would undoubtedly be approved with equal speed. Ed, how about a few across-the-country reports on Christianity in action for us?
Well, Brent, 2 more victims have died as a result of yesterday's Amtrak wreck in Ohio. Officials have stated that no investigation would be forthcoming, since the incident was obviously an act of God. Insurance industry officials, who are under no liability for acts of God, have praised the decision as divinely inspired. In the local scene in Pinellas County, 3 blacks caught on the wrong side of the wall after dark were arrested after failure to produce work permits. The local Ku Klux Klan awarded a plaque to Police Commissioner Reverend Everett Reich III for his efforts in promptly apprehending blacks who stray from their walled section of the city, particularly after sundown. And another 75 suspected homosexuals were rounded up today and sent to the Chrome Avenue Health and Safety Detention Center. Well-known lawyer Luke LaRue was quoted yesterday as objecting to the recent repeal of all civil rights for homosexuals. We have been unable to locate him for further comment. He failed to return to either his law offices or his family home since being questioned by police. And a Dade County teacher was arrested today for possessing a banned book. School Superintendent Reverend Howard Updike has named student Faith Thompson Central Covenant High School Citizen of the Month for reporting her teacher to officials of the Unified Christian School System. Superintendent Reverend Updike was quoted as saying, "This is just one more example of the fine Christian values instilled in today's schools." Reverend Al, we'll let you fill our listeners in on how people are serving our Lord through sports.
Well, thank you, Ed. Naturally, the Culver City Christians defeated the Bay City Lions in football last night. Culver's coach Whitebread gave credit to his co-coach Jesus and thanked his Heavenly Father for giving him another victory. Coach Darkside from the other team thanked God for this opportunity to see where their weaknesses were and for the wonderful character-building experience this was for the team. This was the Lions' 7th straight loss to the Culver City Christians. Unfortunately, not all of the players on the Lions teams appreciated the wisdom of God's will so properly. One player went so far as to curse God and was immediately suspended from the team and remanded to police. Another player was fined for refusing to join in the post-game hymn. The $5,000 fine was levied when an instant replay tape showed that he was merely mouthing the words rather than actually singing. And now our special segment for women only. Men, you can take a break now and relieve yourself if you wish. For now, we're going to have our guest wife today is Nan Owens, who will tell us for what women should be thinking about these days in our Christian nation. Nan?
Thank you, Reverend Al. Ladies, if you are seeking a wonderful way to become closer to Jesus, develop Christian values in your homes, and produce practical benefits at the same time, might I suggest needlepoint. This task requires little skill, no training, and is very applicable to us ladies that we can learn it and do it very quickly. You keep your hands busy, but at the same time you're able to watch your children and drop it quickly if any of them need help. The repetitive motion helps you to meditate and to think about the wonders of Jesus and reflect on the happiness that is yours and your family's in Jesus Christ. Now, tomorrow's program, you're going to want to make sure that you listen because we're going to feature tips on raising good children in a Christian home. We're going to concentrate on which Bible verses to read and which should be avoided. We all know that children and women should never be permitted to read the Bible just on their own and in its entirety, but that they might possibly misinterpret what they are reading. So we'll give you some specific guidelines on which verses and parts of the Bible will reveal the goodness of the book as it should be seen. Next week, we're going to have a series on how to satisfy your husband without resorting to sinful ways. And now, ladies, please tell your husband that the real news has returned and that they can return to the sets. Reverend Brent has a few more important things to tell them.
Thank you, Nan. And thank you, Mr. Owens, for loaning us your wife. The government denied Christian relief funds for the large area of Southern California destroyed last month in a massive earthquake. Officials from the government's Creation Science Institute determined that the quake was a punishment from God. Survivors were urged to repent, thank God for sparing them, and pray to God for guidance in rebuilding their lives. Suspected abortionist Howard Bailey was executed this afternoon after being videotaped yesterday by police officials in the act of agreeing to perform an illegal abortion. Scumbucket. The video tape was considered sufficient evidence to produce a conviction this morning. Bailey compounded his crime, blasphemously questioning the divine authority of the court by suggesting that an appeal should be forthcoming. His co-conspirator, Miss Heather Whitehill, was remanded to the Oral Roberts Rehabilitation and Recovery Center. There, her preborn child will receive the round-the-clock protection it deserves. Whitehill will be counseled on her duties as a future mother. Ed, you have a closing story for us?
Sure do, Brent, and it's a great victory for the Lord. Police today raided a secret meeting of the Hemlock Society, held to commemorate the 5-year anniversary of the execution of Dr. Jack Kevorkian. The Hemlock Society, officially disbanded by government edict when the Quayle administration took office, was infiltrated by thought police member Martin Judas. Judas videotaped the group sacrilegiously espousing suicide, a direct and obvious attempt to subvert the will of our Lord Jesus. Back to you, Reverend Al.
Thank you, Ed. Ed, that's the news for tonight. And friends, may God be with you and Jesus too. May God comfort and keep you all, and may his wrath fall on all those who deny his love and sin. Don't forget to send us your love offerings to the station. After all, we do get tax funding, but we can always use more help from you in order to help and spread the word of the Lord. And once again, thank you for having been with us. Good night from the Christian News Services. Bye-bye. A Christian theocracy, can it happen here? Might be more likely than you think. We have been pleased to bring you the previous spoof and skit to give you at least a chilling premonition of what it would be like to live in a Christian theocracy in America. Ed, I really like your character. I wish I would have seen more of it.
Yeah, I'm sorry old Brinkley's going to retire one of these days, but I'm sure some proper Christian will be there to fill in our hypothetical situation.
Well, the scary part is that it's not necessarily that hypothetical. I mean, after all, Dan Quayle is making a run for the presidency, or at least making noises about making a run for the presidency. And there's no question that Quayle is heavily involved with far-right Christian groups. Recently, you mentioned Coral Ridge on another program. Recently, he appeared at a large conference held by Coral Ridge Ministries. He was their keynote speaker. Kind of makes you wonder, wonder about where their priorities are if they can't come up with anybody more intelligent than that to lead the program. But
another thing is, of course, we're on the threshold of having enough votes by states to have a constitutional convention. And can you imagine the potential ramifications of that if the Christian right ever got hold of the Constitution and rewrote it? Of course, the Bill of Rights would probably be totally eliminated and rewritten in such a way to really construct the country on the foundation of a particular religion.
And unlike on this show, where, I should say, unlike on that show, Nan can actually say something about how that would affect women.
Nan, tell us.
Well, you started out with saying that you liked Ed's character. Please don't say that to me. Yes, it definitely would affect women. All of the rights and that women have very painfully won over the years, of course, would disappear in a flash. And not only would we not be able to work and have meaningful jobs, but we just plain wouldn't have rights. We would be non-persons.
But yet at the same time, it seems oddly enough, ironically enough, many women claim that it's precisely in this theocracy that their rights would be respected as women, and they would be in a more secure and stable type of environment as opposed to now where they're out on their own.
Yes, they would be if they were willing to go along with what the circumstances would be. For instance, if you were married to an abusive man, you could not leave him and expect to be able to fend for yourself in that world. So you would be, you would get taken care of if you stayed within those parameters.
I think a lot of it depends upon what is your definition of what a woman is. I mean, if your definition of a woman, what a woman is, or a woman's purpose in the world is that she is to be a broodmare mother, take care of the home, and that's it, then I'm sure, you know, the idea, the idealized idea that many Christian women have is that they would return to some type of Leave It to Beaver society where, or Donna Reed is a good example, you know, where they would wash dishes in high heels and pearls and be put up on a pedestal and worshipped by their husbands. Of course, this was never the reality of society. This was a TV world, but this is the idea that many Christian men have tried to convince Christian women that that's what it would be like for them.
And that subjugated attitude toward women was established with the creation story, wasn't it? Because the Adam and Eve characters didn't come about simultaneously. The Eve came about as the helpmeet for Adam, who was simply bored and needed somebody to bide his time. So along comes the woman to be his, you know, his personal attendant, yeah, if you will, sure. So that carries all the way up into today's religious thinking.
Well, refocusing for a minute on the political scene, though, you mentioned a constitutional convention that's coming up. It's been my understanding that some of the religious right have indeed had so-called stealth candidates to seek election. Is that a significant threat at this time to a convention like that, or is this to be ignored?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Many of these stealth candidates have been elected without exposing their religious affiliations whatsoever. As a matter of fact, some of them have even come off as being pro-rights. One good example of what happens in this case, and this isn't a stealth candidate exactly, the state attorney, or one of the state attorneys, Willie Meggs up in Tallahassee, was pushing for a law to ban nude dancing primarily, and focused it on the idea of a back bathing suit. And they wrote a 16-page definition of what exposed buttocks was. And he enlisted the help of feminist groups, and of course this has been something that's kind of a tossed point among feminist groups. He enlisted the help of the feminist groups to get this passed by appealing to them, saying that these nude dance clubs were exploiting women, and so therefore they should not be allowed, and downplaying the idea that this would have anything to do with anything other than dance clubs. Once the law was passed, someone questioned him about, well, what if I'm out by my pool, or out by the community pool, or out at the pool at Florida State University, and I'm wearing a thong bathing suit? Well, that doesn't apply to me, does it? And he said, the law is the law, and I can enforce it wherever I damn well please. So
you had a hidden agenda.
That's an example of how their hidden agendas work. And he was less hidden than most. Most of the stealth candidates don't even talk about anything having to do, or they use code words that have become meaningless, like family values or even values.
And then on that note, do you see feminism as being a counter force to Christian right, or is Brent right that sometimes they make strange bedfellows in some cases?
I'm afraid they do, especially most recently, where they've gone out on rather arcane types of campaigns, and instead of dealing with mainstream issues, they've involved themselves with pornography, lesbianism, and other things like that. And they've gone away from the rights of women, both women working and women at home. Their interests are intertwined. Certainly, if this comes to pass, it will greatly affect feminism and women also, because education is going to become an issue then. And any kind of meaningful education will be largely denied to women because they don't need that in order to run a home.
Well, on that note, I think I'd like to say a few things on that. If the Christian right has made a serious and concerted effort anywhere, it is in the area of education, specifically in the public schools. According to one survey, since 1980, the attendance of young Christians at churches has fallen 34% in the last 10 years or so. This is of great concern to them, and they see the cause of this to be the secular public schools. So now we have groups like Emphasis for it is Excellence in Education,
Citizens for Excellence in Education.
Citizens for Excellence in Education. And on the surface, these seem to be well-intentioned, benign groups that want to improve education. Who doesn't? Yet it seems once again that there is a hidden agenda involved here, isn't there?
Oh, exactly. As a matter of fact, someone who's, I mean, education is my field. I'm working on a doctorate and intend to teach English at the college level. And one of the things that I see that is very scary is the reasoning ability, or I should say lack of reasoning ability, that often accompanies students that are just entering college. I mean, I've taught freshman composition, and they have absolutely no logic skills. And a lot of this is a result of two things. Not only is it religious organized schooling, but also the homeschooling movement, which is growing. And a lot of people think of the homeschooling movement, they think of the wealthy parents who are not happy with the jobs that either the public schools or the private schools are doing, and they keep their kids at home and they give them a good, solid education. And in some circumstances that happens. But what's really scary are things like Pat Robertson's group that's been pushing the original McGuffey readers. And those are being used by a lot of homeschoolers, and they're very anti-Semitic. They were first published in 1836. So, of course, they support things like slavery that we obviously don't see. And they also support the idea of a subordinate role for women in the home. And these are what these kids are being taught with. And I think that we're at a juncture now where we need to start protecting children from abuse. We have laws to protect them from physical abuse, but there are no laws to protect them from being denied a proper education, which is mental abuse. And I think we need to start looking in that direction if we're ever going to make progress in society.
Well, I think, though, the counter-argument that is made by the Christian right is that it's precisely the opposite. It's the public secular school system that's forcing its views upon them and not giving them their rights to read religious texts or what have you. Well, how would one answer that charge? Well,
first off, I think the purpose of a secular school or of any school should be education. They're confusing education with indoctrination. It's something that they have commonly done. You can send your child to a secular school all week, and they go to church on the weekends. They come home at night, and you can Bible read with them or whatever. What they actually want to do is they want the government to teach their religion for them, because despite the fact of their so-called concern about their children, they're actually too lazy in most cases to take the time to teach them their religion. Of course, there's another side to that also, and that is one of my friends who was a Jehovah's Witness mentioned to me that the more secular schooling that he had, even though he attended his Jehovah's Witness meetings and church and everything, the more he started to question his faith. And I really think, and perhaps this is one way where the fundamentalist churches are right, I really think that education, secular education that teaches logic and rational thinking is inimical to religion. That if you actually learn how to reason, you will reject religion because it has no reasonable basis. And I can see why they're scared about that. The only thing is, for our future, we need to have people who can reason. Otherwise, we're going to become a society of McDonald's workers. And I don't want to disparage McDonald's workers. I mean, that's not the point. The point is that for many McDonald's workers, it doesn't take a lot of education. Maybe I should say we'll become a society of needle pointers. You know, a society where the only thing that you're capable of doing is a repetitive job that someone else has already given you very precise instructions for, because you can no longer think for yourself.
Well, on that point, Nan, it's been my understanding that up to 60 to 70% of women choose not to identify themselves as feminists because the very term feminist oftentimes seems to have a rather negative connotation. And do you see this trend as being further a case of eroding away women's rights and perhaps giving further leverage to the religious right? Or is it the case that women will be a neutral factor as to the power of the religious right?
I don't think that it's a case that it is giving credence to the religious views of women. I do think that it's rather unfortunate that many women are reluctant to call themselves feminists, because, you know, we need each other, and we need to be able to have these rights and to be able to function well in society and to protect our children, because the society that discriminates against women also very much discriminates against children, and this is a big concern of women. So no, I don't think that it's necessary, because I think that most women are actually working for these particular issues, unfortunately sometimes not together as much as they could. Well,
and then turning to you, Ed, how likely do you think that it is going to be the case that we have a Christian theocracy by the turn of the millennia?
I'll tell you one thing for sure. The movement that's underway to do exactly that is just absolutely not going to let up. No matter what laws that we work out, there's always this devil concept within them that we've got to turn things back. We've got to turn the clock back. We've got to live in the past, and that's where our future lies. The more inclined we are to disregard the motives of these groups and to ignore them and to spend our time watching Roseanne instead of the Atheists of Florida forum, the more likely these people have of being able to get their agenda passed in this country while we're sleeping. And that's what worries us most.
That's actually a very good point I'd like to elaborate on just a little bit, and that is the fact that many people often ask me, why do I belong to a group? Why do I belong to so many groups that I'm involved in? They say, why aren't you happy? As a matter of fact, a letter writer who was attacking me in the newspaper said, why aren't you happy to just let people believe what they want to believe and not worry about it? Well, as I think I've mentioned before, atheists would be perfectly happy to let religious people alone if religious people would let us alone. Well, but that's never happened.
On that note, if you are an atheist or a prospective atheist, or you just want to find out more about what atheism is really all about, please write to the addresses at the closing credits of this program, and we'll be pleased to send you our informative pamphlet, The Truth About Atheism, and our newsletter, the Atheists of Florida newsletter. Once again, thank you for being with us. Good night.